It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Tuesday, June 11th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is talking San Jose Sharks and where they're at and how the Flyers might be related.
That'll be fun.
Your Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here, as always, with Russ Cohen, who's on all your favorite social media apps at Sportsology. We are at Locked On Flyers on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Twitter as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. You can find us over on YouTube or on the SiriusXM app or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. We will be talking on today's show with Sheng Peng, who is part of San Jose Hockey Now and NBC Sports Bay Area, to talk about the lottery luck, where they will 99.9% sure be selecting Macklin Celebrini, talking about what that means to the team, what's happening with the coaching situation, and so much more. And really excited to bring that to you. Just a reminder, we have our weekly poll, a link to that in the show notes. So make sure you get your voice heard there. And we're just going to dive right into it. So here's our conversation with Sheng Peng. The San Jose Sharks are in the very enviable position of having the first overall pick and likely to take Macklin Celebrini. But there's more to the Sharks than just that. And we are here with Sheng Peng of San Jose Hockey Now and NBC Sports Bay Area to talk Sharks Flyers. Sheng, how are you doing today?
Very good. How's it going?
Yeah, great.
Excellent. So excited to have you here. First off, it is very clear this past season was abysmal for the Sharks, but given everything and the turnover, what is the mood in the Sharks fandom right now?
Well, it's as excited as it's been since the Sharks maybe were last in the playoffs. So getting a number one pick, obviously Will Smith signing too. So there is a lot of optimism among Sharks fans at the moment.
We all know they're going to take Celebrini, and Celebrini is going to be a great player for him. The interesting thing, though, Sheng, is with Smith coming out, I wouldn't just hand the 1C job to Celebrini because it's possible Smith could take it. I think that's something now that there could bring about some debate at some point between the fans, like who's the 1C, Celebrini or Smith. It's a good problem to have.
Yeah, like you said, it's a good problem to have. And I think that one of the benefits of having these two guys come out at the same time, we don't know if Celebrini is going to turn pro, but we assume that he will. But having two guys play off each other, like the comparison Taves and Kane, which is the most common kind of comparison that those two have received. Those guys, was talking with Kobe Cohen, ESPN, knows both those guys pretty well. And they played off each other. They competed against each other, but in a healthy way. And they raised each other's games. And so can Celebrini and Smith do that? If they can do that, then that would be obviously the ideal result for the Sharks. But you can see Smith maybe concentrating a little more on the defensive side because his partner in crime, Celebrini, that's what he's well known for. You can see Celebrini maybe upping his offense. Obviously, Celebrini is very, very talented and skilled in his own right. But if you have a guy like Smith and you're playing with him, that maybe you're gonna just be maybe a little more flashy, maybe a little more like that. And so you can kind of just see them playing off each other and the results being, well, hopefully like they were for Taves and Kane.
Well, the second part of this is the San Jose power play is going to get better with those two on it.
Yeah, maybe not next year because I don't want to put that much on, but it is quite possible. I mean, Smith is so good on the power play.
Smith is really good on the power play.
Yeah, he might be able to slip step right into like 75% of the power plays in the league and be a useful player. And so I think there's a good chance that a lot of Smith's production his first year might be a lot from the power play. And I mean, for young players, right, that's sort of a easier place to kind of produce that first year. And absolutely, yeah, seeing how those guys kind of fit together on the power play is one of those things that I think Sharks fans are really looking for, especially a guy like Smith, who always seems to be ahead of the play in college. So see how that translates to the NHL.
So with these young, talented players coming into the lineup, I think, a big question for me is who's going to coach them, and how's the team dealing with that? And these, Smith coming in, I don't know who's going to coach me. So like, what do you think happened with David Quinn first off? And then what do you think the coaching search is looking like now?
Well, I think with Quinn, I think that the residual of last season, even if it wasn't on him, really, I don't think it was. Honestly, I think that Mike Grier constructed a really poor roster that didn't make, to me, in the end, a ton of sense. Now I look back on it, didn't make a lot of sense to me. And Quinn had to just sort of roll with that. And I think that Quinn did the best that he could and kept guys positive and playing hard. And I think actually for a team that had 47 points, they were actually pretty positive as a group, and they played pretty hard. They just were not staffed properly, if you want to put it.
I wonder if I could
nice
interject.
Way. Sure.
If you think Quinn had a real positive effect on William Macklin, because I feel like he did.
He did. I think that Quinn had a positive effect on a number of young players like Henry Thrun, like William Eklund, even players that maybe spent more time with the Barracuda, but they came back better players, having gone through what John McCarthy at the Barracuda, what David Quinn wanted, and also the development coaches. A guy like Thomas Bordolo came back a different player in the last couple of months of this past season than he had shown before, in a good way, too. Different player in a good way. And so I think that there's a lot for David Quinn and his staff to be proud of in that sense. If some of these players take the next step with the Sharks or are part of the next playoff Sharks team, that David Quinn had an impact on. Somebody else, who Fabian Zetterlund, who came last year from the New Jersey Devils for Timo Meier, scored 0 goals in 22 games. Looked like he didn't belong in the NHL, at least when he was with the Sharks. And David Quinn helped put him on the right kind of mental track. Obviously, Fabian did a lot of work himself, but as Fabian earned more time, he got more ice time, and he scored 24 goals, so he took advantage of it. And so, anyway, also on Quinn, I think a lot of it was just that the season was so bad, and this was a chance for Mike Grier to kind of start things over again. And you can't fire 20 players, obviously, so you can let go of your coach. And so I think that's a little bit of a part of it. In terms of the current coaching search, the names that we hear the most are Marco Sturm, Ryan Warsofsky, and Jeff Blashill. That's the biggest names. I also have heard myself Jeff Halpern, and Elliot Friedman also reported Jeremy Colleton. So if I were to guess at this point, I'm digging on this a little bit more this week, and maybe I'll find out more at the draft combine in a little bit. But Sharks are the remaining vacancy, so maybe that makes the job a little bit more valuable too. So in the sense of missed out, like Jay Woodcroft, for example, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I like Halpern and Warsofsky, actually. I like them as players. I think they've been good. Beyond that, they could actually, I think they could do something for them. Although you kind of wonder now, as one of the questions we have is like, with Joe Pavelski, would they dare bring him on the staff and make him like an assistant? Would they try that?
No, these are very good questions. But yeah, my guess is Halpern or Sturm. Halpern has a long-standing relationship with Mike Grier, back to as players, and they are still good friends now. And Sturm has Sharks pedigree, and also obviously the pedigree of leading Team Germany to a silver medal in 2018 as a coach.
Right.
So pretty impressive background there for Marco Sturm. So those would be sort of my guesses for clubhouse favorites. But like I mentioned, I think that maybe more candidates will emerge because it's only vacancy left. So guys like Jay Woodcroft, who missed out, maybe he might be interested now, when maybe he wasn't as interested a month ago when New Jersey and a lot of other jobs were still up in the air. And so we'll have to see about that. And then on your Joe Pavelski question, I think that the Sharks should do pretty much anything that they can to get Joe Pavelski back in the organization. I know that Dallas wants the same thing. They want to keep Joe in the organization, even if he's not playing. And the Sharks should do everything that they can to this time to outbid the Stars for his services.
Right.
Yeah, I think that a lot of fans, not just Sharks fans and not just Dallas fans, are sad to see Pavelski retire because he's just one of those guys that you love to watch over the course of his career. But yeah, I think that could be a very interesting offseason battle of which team might get him as like a player development coach or something like that in the organization moving forward. We'll have more Sharks talk with Sheng coming up next.
We all know how important life insurance is, but it can be overwhelming trying to find the right policy on your own. Policy Genius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It saves you time and money so you can provide your family with a financial safety net starting today. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year of $1 million coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. I know it feels so much better to have insurance and not to have to worry about my family being covered. Your work life insurance policy may not offer enough protection for your family's needs. Even worse, it may not come with you if you leave your job, and Policy Genius gives you an unbiased advice from a licensed expert support team. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com/lockedonnhl or click in the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/lockedonnhl.
We will be answering your mailbag questions on tomorrow's show, so make sure to get those in. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com, send us a message on Twitter, or comment on our YouTube channel. Here is more of our conversation with Sheng Peng on the Sharks.
So you're going to go there. The Sharks are going to go Celebrini with their first pick. We're sure of that. I'm pretty sure, 99.99999% sure. That second first round pick, though, they need a defenseman. I'm a little worried about their pipeline with defensemen. They've got a couple of good young ones. Like Thrune's a good one, but there's not a lot. Haviland's okay, but there's not a lot. And this is a defense-rich draft. So do you feel like in that second pick, they are going to target a defenseman?
I think that ideally they would come out of this draft with a top flight center like Celebrini and a top flight defensive prospect, whoever that is. But where they are at 14 is, as you know, Russ, is kind of a strange place in this draft. There's a good chance that sort of the presumptive top 6 defensemen of this draft, not mention them in order, but guys like Buyam and Yakimchuk and Lashunov, anyway, all those guys would be gone by 14. And so at that point, then what do the Sharks do? So that's kind of the quandary I think that they will find themselves in if they stay at 14, right?
Yeah, here's what my counter would be. You still have Adam Jiricek, who is David's brother. There's a lot of potential there. You still have Cole Hudson. You have EJ Emery. They're not all going to be top flight offensive defensemen, but some of them are very good defensemen. So I think, while you named all those top ones, there's still some good ones, and that there's other ones that are physical too, like Will Skaken. It just depends. But if I were them and all those guys were off the board, like you said, I would have to still look at Jiricek, Emery, and Hudson, because remember, Cole's the brother of Lane. There's a lot of offense in that player. So there's still some guys they could get, and I think they still should do it, even at that spot.
Well, see, I think that's part of the question, because another guy who might be there that you might consider is Solberg, who's
Sebastian Solberg is an interesting one. I don't know if he'll actually be there. I think he should be there in real life, but he's picked up so much so that he may not actually be there.
He may not be there. Jiricek has questions about his knees, though from what I understand it's fine, but maybe the Sharks aren't that interested in a player that hasn't played, I think, competitively since like January, right? December, right? At least not at 14. Hudson, obviously, there's always going to be that size. How well can he defend? That sort of thing, right? And so you wonder if a guy like a Hudson, maybe you use the Sharks also have the 33 and 42 pick, so maybe you use that on defense.
Yeah, you could use 33 on Hudson. That's fair. I mean, that's
14. You use if all these defensemen go, right, then like one of the sort of premium forward prospects might fall. and then you have to balance. Well, yeah, there might be this pretty good defense available, but there's this really grade A forward prospect available
No,
that
that's
maybe
fair.
shouldn't be. And so that's, I think, where they might fall into. Or if there is a team that is interested in trading with the Sharks, or the Sharks can move up. And I know we might talk about Philadelphia at 12 or New Jersey at 10, because New Jersey has said that
Yeah, swap of 12 and 14
Yeah.
is possible. I would say
Yeah.
that's possible.
Yeah.
Right, maybe get you a Yakimchuk, right, or a Solberg, right, if you really like him.
You would,
So
you
these
would
are
get
possible.
Solberg there
You could
easy, but I'm not sure I would do it. But yes, you could get him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
or
I
like
think Yakimchuk is more likely
Right.
in that scenario.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would say, just to add to the mix in terms of a potential Flyers Sharks swap in this, it is very possible that the Flyers and Sharks will have either consecutive picks or 2 picks apart again when, the Flyers get the Florida Panthers late round pick, right?
That's
and
true.
Then the Sharks have the first pick in the second round.
Mm-hmm.
Something could happen there as well as part of a deal.
Okay, how about, guys, we're gonna bring this up a little later, but I'm gonna put it out right now. How about Cam Atkinson and the number 12 for the Sharks 14?
Yeah, I think the Flyers might do that to save the 5.8. Honestly, like if I was, to give out like draft analytics, I don't think that pick would be affected that much by dropping 2 spots, and you would save the cap space. And so I would have to really consider doing that.
And the Sharks would have a better shot at,
yes, they'll have a better shot at Yakimchuk, who I'm going to say on record I'm not super high on, but he is going to go in that area. You're right.
And I think, that cap space, as long as there's no salary retained, and the Sharks took the entirety of Cam Atkinson's salary, it's certainly a deal you have to think about, right?
It is.
Well, brilliant. We've made the
solved
first
that
trade of the
problem.
2024 draft.
Well,
the second one.
The problem with that is that Cam Atkinson has a no trade clause that we would have to get him to waive. But I think for the opportunity to play,
to talk to Cam about it,
to talk to say, hey, you want to play with Will Smith and Macklin Celebrini for a year in the Bay Area?
Yeah.
Have a good time, not be too cold. I don't know. I think
it sounds it sounds inviting. I mean, I know I'd do it. So also, Sheng, how open are the Sharks fans to this rebuild? Because rebuilds sometimes take 5-6 years. They're never quick. The Sharks are a year into it from what I can see as far as how their team is, what they're getting. I don't think there's any real shortcuts for them because they still need, like you said, a lot of positions. Goaltending may still be one of them. And so, like, based on that, they're going to need another 2-3 good drafts and some, and maybe a few trades. So, yeah, I think it's another 3-4 years easy. How are fans taking that?
Well, not so well this past season. Attendance was pretty much a record low for the Sharks, the lowest capacity of all the NHL teams in the league, lowest capacity attendance, I think, the last couple of years. So I don't know if they've been taking it well overall. Obviously, the diehards are still on board. But I think, though, that getting the number 1 pick and getting a guy like Celebrini, who is a immediate and obvious face of the franchise, that's going to be a big sort of a big morale boost to the rebuild, I would say. Then, so like I said, the last couple of years it's been a little bit rough, but I think that they're headed in the right direction because a couple of lottery balls went their way.
Yeah, I think, with the Flyers being in a rebuild, you look to other teams in rebuilds at the same time, and there's going to be comparisons made. And then you look to teams that are further along in the rebuild in years, but maybe not as in progress. I'll bring up the Detroit Red Wings and in that scenario as well. And there tends to be a conversation where there's no one way to do a rebuild, but that your team is doing it wrong, right? I think that is for teams that have been struggling for a while, that's kind of, the attitude that a lot of people have. There's a lot of right ways to do it, but we're doing it wrong. And that's why we're not there yet. And I think that's like what Russ is talking about. Is there a worry that that's the mentality that San Jose Sharks fans?
Well, right now it's optimism now, though. And so, in 3 years and 5 years, that the Sharks are still kind of in the same place in the standings, even if, say, Macklin is as good as he's supposed to be. Even Will Smith is as good as he's supposed to be, but Mike Grier hasn't been able to put the adequate support pieces around them, and they're still kind of struggling. Then of course, yeah, the fans will be very very down about that, and it'll show up in the ticket sales and in attendance and all that kind of stuff, right? But right now at this moment, though, right, it's just pure optimism because you just got that pick, number one pick, and you don't know what he's going to be. For all you know, he can take the league by storm next year and put up a point per game, right? And all that kind of stuff, right? So we don't know. Or he'll go the way of Joel Thornton, Steven Stamkos, their rookie years, Jack Hughes, very rough rookie years. And so who knows? Who knows where Macklin, kind of where he will fall in that scale his rookie year. But right now, again, just pure optimism.
Now, I don't think the Flyers would be looking for this guy, but give me a reason why all of a sudden Alexander Barabanov's offense just fell off the map. Because he had a pretty good year the year before, and then just last year, just nothing.
Well, the last couple of years, he's played a lot with Tomas Hertl. His first year with the Sharks, he played a lot with Evander Kane and Tomas Hertl. So every year, he's played with basically the Sharks' top center. Last year, he played more with Logan Couture, and Logan Couture had a great season last year. And so I think that's a big part of it, where Alex didn't have as much time with. Well, it would really only be Tomas Hertl or Mikhail Granlund this year for this past year for the Sharks. So he didn't play a lot with either of those guys. He also had an injury early in the season that kind of took him off the track. But he's not a bad buy low guy, though. He's a guy that kind of is sneaky strong with the puck down low, clever and skilled. He's not a bad bet for sort of a minimum kind of contract, that sort of deal if he wants it. I don't know. He might get a better deal in the KHL though, to be honest at this point. And so I would think that has a lot to do with it, that he's not necessarily a guy that I see as, once the Sharks took him away from the top centers, that he had to maybe do a little more of the offensive lifting, and he couldn't quite do that without the right line mates, or line mates quite as skilled. And so if you're looking for him to maybe be a 50-point guy, if you're not going to put him with your top centers, I don't know if that's going to happen, but if you're able to put him with one of your better centers, he's a pretty good complementary winger.
We will wrap up with Sheng talking San Jose Sharks and Flyers and how they're related and all of that coming up next.
Summertime means baseball, the NBA Finals, and more, and you can bet it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you could use to bet everything from the NBA, from the Finals MVP to who's going to hit the one out of the park. I'm still going to go with the Celtics, pick an MVP from there. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
So in trying to look at, the rebuild that the Sharks are doing and the Flyers are doing right now, Flyers fans, I think, and rightfully so, can say, oh, but the Sharks got a #1 overall draft pick. The Flyers never did in all of this in these years. But, you look at the Will Smith pick from last year and Matvei Michkov, and Michkov, by a lot of people's arguments, would have gotten picked higher if not for the risk factor and the 3-year contract in the KHL. So I think you can put them as very similar picks.
Sure.
And so the difference really is Celebrini, in my opinion. But, do you think there's a comparison here? And, will the Sharks leapfrog the Flyers simply because of Celebrini? Or is there any way to compare these rebuilds?
I'll look back more on the Flyers rebuild, but my sense of it, you guys can correct me, is that the Flyers did take a little bit longer to kind of say we were in a rebuild. But along the way, though, they've done a good job of drafting pretty good support players. And so guys like a Farabee types, I know that he's a little bit up and down, but I mean, for where you guys picked him, a pretty good player. Guys like Cam York that seem to be coming into themselves. So I think that, what I'm getting at is that you guys have the kind of depth. Maybe you guys don't have that star power yet, right? Right. And that maybe Michkov will bring that to you guys, bring you that #1 player, that number one player on a contender, or at least your top offensive player on a contender, that kind of quality of player. And so the Sharks, what they don't have is depth, really, for the most part.
Right.
We talked about their defense,
Yeah,
right?
they have star power, but no depth.
Right,
They have
right,
potential
It's
right.
star
true.
power. Yeah.
Right.
It's
And
like
so,
you look at their cap friendly page and they have like 8 billion people to re-sign or slots open right now.
but not
Like,
a lot of people that are very, very good, to be honest.
Right,
And
right.
so I think I don't know if there's a comparison, but just kind of the circumstance of the draft. Obviously, the Flyers landed on the 1-2 picks. They would draft different players than maybe they have, but you can still obviously make good picks wherever you pick. And the Flyers, it seems like they have done that. And so when Michkov comes, that he should have adequate support around him, that he's not going to be stepping into like Celebrini and Smith, onto a 47-point team, right? If Michkov comes next year, he's stepping onto a team that maybe overachieved, but almost made the playoffs last year. And so that kind of shows kind of the support players that he has around him. So anyway, you look at the Sharks and sort of their depth like that. And you mentioned their defense, right? Like, that's one area that they really need to strengthen. Whereas the Flyers, they seem to have some pieces for kind of a competent defense there, right? And so, so they've been able to do kind of maybe a better job of setting the table. Maybe that's a way, if you want to compare it. Maybe the Flyers have done a better job of setting the table for Michkov to come in than for Celebrini and Smith. Celebrini and Smith will have to do maybe a little more heavy lifting than you want for 18, 19-year-old player.
Yeah, no, that's fair. A lot of times with the Flyers, we talk about messaging, and I'm sure the Sharks have gone through that too with their fans to kind of set them on the right message. But just for this show, I'm kind of wondering, what is the messaging having a picture of a Big Mac behind you? What are you trying to tell us?
Oh, this poster, my wife and I, we got it at a vintage store. It's actually really cool. I don't know if you can see that. It's in Chinese.
I figured it was, yeah.
Yeah, it's actually a poster that was at the U.S. Embassy in Beijing in July 4th, 1985. So this was actually 1985. So this is before Tiananmen Square. This is like Big Mac diplomacy. This is the U.S. Embassy. They're literally inviting. I don't know if they're inviting everybody in, but maybe this is a poster for like felt like important Chinese like politicians. Hey, come have a Big Mac at the U.S. Embassy.
We'll talk over a Big Mac.
Yeah, Big Mac diplomacy. So
I like it.
Yeah, we found it at a store for, I think it was like $5. So it's a pretty cool poster. So
yeah, that's a cool poster. But yeah, what about the messaging?
Always can count on Russ to go a left turn question there.
but I do want to get back to the messaging, because I think the Flyers have done a pretty good job of telling their fans to be like patient, and they've had a lot of press conferences. I'm wondering, is that something the Sharks have been doing too, like trying to be as transparent as they can, knowing that the fans are going to really kind of wonder what's going on?
No, it's a little different here in San Jose. The Sharks were dragged kind of kicking and screaming into the rebuild. Okay. Obviously, after 2019, their last playoff appearance, they had a lot of these big star players, big contracts that are hard to get rid of. Guys like Tomas Hertl and Erik Karlsson and Vlasic and Brent Burns and Logan Couture and down the line of players, right? And so anyway, the Sharks, I think they hoped for, I mean, with some reason, because if you're going to get rid of these contracts, you're not going to get the full value for them for the most part. And so just like we saw with Erik Karlsson, even to some degree, Tomas Hertl, even though I think the Sharks got a good deal for him, but still, they could have got more for him if he wasn't signed to that long contract. But anyway, though, so when you have these players, right, the Sharks kept trying to push back the rebuild and hope that maybe Erik Karlsson will come back to form. Maybe one of these young players that they had would kind of surprise and emerge as real contributors. Just hope on something so they can get back to the playoffs, right? And so they really pushed it back for a couple of years there. And I don't know if they really started the rebuild in earnest until Mike Greer took over. And it wasn't even until I think early in that season, when that season started slow, and they had a lot of the components of those old Sharks teams. So they saw Erik Karlsson, who was going through, of course, at that point, Norris Trophy, a revival season, right? And Tomas Hertl was on the roster. And so anyway, that season, though, didn't start off great for the team. I think at that point, then they knew, okay, we really have to. We can't we can't continue this anymore. I mean, Eric Carlson scoring 100 points, and it's the last year, David Quinn's first year was like a 62 point season.
Right.
So Eric Carlson did come back to form, and we're still not any good. And
Right.
and Eric wanted out too, and
Right.
Tomash wanted out too, and so that's a big part of it too. And so they eventually kind of took the best offer that they could, kind of for both, I think. So yeah, so it hasn't been open and transparent. It's not until really the last 2 years that the Sharks have even been willing to say the rebuild, that word, out in public. Literally 4 years ago, you couldn't get anyone in the Sharks to say that word. They just wouldn't say it. They resisted it. Doug Wilson would call it a retool or a reset, right? All the other R words that aren't rebuild. And so, but now that they're in it, right? And it's not just because they want to draft lottery, right? But I would say that consistently since last year, when Mike started making these moves that were breaking apart the team, like trading Timo Meier, that's another big one, right?
Right.
Trading Carlson, admitting throughout the season that Carlson was available for trade.
Right.
These are admissions of a rebuild, even if you won't actually say that word, which they were still a little resistant to say. But basically, though, since last year, though, that's sort of been very clear that that's been their direction, and they haven't shied away from it too much. But they've never come out with a letter. There's never a big rebuild press conference or a declaration of rebuild press conference. But lo and behold, though, about a year and a half into this, you land a number 1 pick. So now the rebuild feels a lot better.
There you go.
It's a lot easier to sell with the number 1 pick.
Yeah.
So I think it's sort of just by accident it's happened this way that are able to, not complete accident, but some degree, some accident. And again, the lottery balls that they're able to talk about it a little bit more openly now.
All right. Well, it sounds like the Sharks have a bright future, but a lot of work ahead to do. And maybe some of that work could involve a deal with the Flyers, whether it's at this draft or in the future. So we'll see if any of that pans out. Sheng, thank you so much for joining us. And where can people find you out there?
You can find me on Twitter at Sheng_Peng, and my work at San Jose Hockey Now and at NBC Sharks.
All right. Once again, thanks to Sheng Peng from San Jose
great.
Hockey Now. So great. So fun. I love that Cam Atkinson trade idea.
And the McDonald's poster. Like, come on.
Yeah, I know. So good. So good. Always a pleasure talking to him. And good luck to them with that first overall pick, plus some other ones, though. So we will see how their draft goes. We'll see how our draft goes, and be back on the show tomorrow where we will be talking mock draft. So look forward to that. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. So if you got those questions or draft thoughts, send them in via Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com or comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ Matt Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube that's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Have a great